Welcome to this session today. I'm now going to show you how to prepare and present Dorper sheep for show and sale. So this is a young Dorper ram that has just been dragged out of the paddock, so he's had no education as far as being washed or even handled. So the first thing that I actually do is we put a halter on them and I tie them up very tight, although his tie-up has become a little bit loose. You've got to be also mindful of them, that they're going to jump, they're going to twist and probably throw themselves down at times. So the main thing to start with is I use a high pressured hose and I hose them down first, which actually seems to tame them off a lot. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to just hose him right down, and that is mainly to get all of the dirt and the grime out of him, but not only that, just to really settle him. I know it does look a little bit strange, but the more that you do it, the more they actually do settle. So with him now, especially you do it, if you keep doing their face, they settle a lot. You'll see by the end of this that he will be a lot calmer. So for this session, you wash down both sides of the animal, and you can see the dirt coming out of him. We do this mainly because we shear them wet or damp, and this is to get all of the dirt and grime out of their coat, that if they do have a back line or a little bit of a coat, this is so we can get all of the grime out and it's not going to blunt your cutters and your combs. So once you can see he doesn't really like it. But I generally do this for quite a few minutes, and once I've done this for a while, I'll then apply shampoo, which is actually not shampoo. I just use good old Morning Fresh. So he'll get lathered right up, soaped right up, so that way you can get in and you can feel him, so he gets used to you touching him. And because if you're going to show a sheep, obviously they've got to be touched, and they've got to learn to be calm and to slow down. So as you can see a lot of the dirt coming out of his coat. This is just a young ram that was pulled out of the paddock yesterday, so I don't like to prepare too much especially my show sheep. I like them to have a little bit of fight in them, because once you see him with all of this off, when he moves, his muscles flex and he'll stand up quite nicely in the end. It doesn't take long to get used to it. As you can see, he's settled down quite a lot now. He is still going to be quite feisty, of course, but right. There you go, buddy. So now all I do is you just get Morning Fresh. It's probably the cheapest thing that you can use on them. Give them put quite a lot on, and then this is where you all of a sudden, this is where you get your hands on. So you really get in and scrub them. And you've also got to be mindful that, they don't jump in your face. So you've got to have your wits about you when you're doing it. He's actually quite not tied up quite as tight as I'd actually like him to be tied up. You can see he's settled quite a lot. Oh, buddy. Come on, move around. Move around. Now, we're going to give him a good old blast again. You always must make sure that you get right under their belly, because we do clip them all over. They get clipped right over. So just make sure that you get as much grit off them as you possibly can. So this process will take a little while to get the soap out of him. Oh, mate, you're right. You can still see the dirt coming off him, so make sure you get right underneath him. I know it's a bit of a process, but you'll actually see a better result in the long run if he's totally clean. So with this, the soap has almost gone out of him, and you can see how much cleaner he is now, even just looking at the front of him. So once we shear him all off, he'll be nice and white and clean underneath. And you will have saved your cutters and your combs. As you can see, he's sort of succumbing to it a lot. He's got a lot used to it. And this tends to wear them out a little bit. And so just make sure that they're always tied up really, really tight, because you don't want them jumping up into your face. So then we'll just take a towel and we just run a towel over him. I guess it's a little bit like when you're breaking a horse or something, you know, you've got to run things over them and pat them down and so they get used to that touch. So now we just we try and get as much of that water out of his coat as we possibly can. Although with him being a young ram, he's still got all that baby fluff, so you can see how he is starting to shed up. So after we've washed him, and I'm in the process of towel drying him off, if you have a look down to his skin there, you'll see how nice and white he is. So he's actually very, very clean, which will give you a great cut, and he'll come up really nice. So that's what we want. We don't want any dirt left in him at all. There we go. So he is now ready. We'll just let him dry off just a little bit in the sunlight. Not that there's much today, but we just let him dry off a little bit so he's not too wet for shearing. Now, once you've got your animal dried off and he's still damp, I bring him into what I've had made. It's purpose built for shearing. I've had this made, it's on a hydraulic lift, so it can go up or down depending on how tall the person is or whereabouts on the animal that you want to shear. So I did this because I'm too old to bend down. So anyway, so where we start off now is we generally start at the back line. You start at the back line and you shear down. I use a 20 blade comb with the cutters. So the reason why we start at the middle of the sheep and then we shear down. Don't shear across, or otherwise you're going to get comb marks that don't look as good. So what we do is we start sort of at the base of the neck here, and we shear him all the way down under his belly, and then once we finish that on both sides, we actually then shear him up. So he gets shorn twice. This will give you a really, really nice velvety finish. Without, you do get some comb marks in them sometimes, but it's not as predominant as going all over the sheep. They look higgledy-piggledy, whereas this way they'll look nice and uniform, smooth and velvety. So I'm just going to introduce you to Penny now. Penny, you want to come over? This is Penny Foster. So Penny does most of my shearing for me now because I don't have time to do it, and I've taught her how I like my sheep to be shorn and presented. So most of what you see going to the show and sale ring is compliments of Penny's great work. So anyway, Penny might just grab a set of shears and start on one side just so we can both go through this sheep really quickly, and you can just get bits and pieces. Then we'll finish him off and you'll see the finished product. Now this contraption is really good because the sheep is tied up tight. I anchor it to the roof, so if they do muck around, then it's not going to fall on you, as I've had it done to me a couple of times. As you can see, the ram is actually a lot quieter, and I think that just is because of the way he was handled before. He's been washed, he's been handled, he's now been put in the crate, although he had to be skull dragged in. Obviously, he just didn't walk in. So he will jump and flinch once we start these, but you can see that he's actually now a lot quieter. It's probably the sheep's temperament also. Not saying that they're all like this. Some fight and carry on, but they can't generally throw themselves down because we tie them very, very tight, although they might sit down or they'll bend and twist. But on a whole, they behave quite well in this contraption that I've had built. So we're just going to start now. You don't need a lot of pressure. You actually only just run the combs down very, very lightly. Just be mindful not to catch their skin. But as you can see, it's coming off really, really well. So that's just starting from his back line down. So all we're trying to do is get the longest bit off, because once we shear him upwards, then you'll see how velvety it'll come up, because it'll just take all of the other loose hair off him. So there's your first Passover. As you can see, you've just got all of the long wool off now, the hair and wool off now. So now this is a really important part where we actually we get in and we shear him upwards, and then that will take off the long wool, and it'll give him a nice clear coat. So we start and go up. Now we've got to pay attention to their legs. Sometimes it's a little bit hard, isn't it, Penny? You can't go up and down their legs. Sometimes it's better just to go down their legs to finish them up, just depending on the sheep and how much hair and wool that they've got on them. But you'll get to know what each sheep needs, because they're not all exactly the same. Their cover's not all the same. Their hair or their wool mix is not all the same. So each one is individual, but he'll come up very nice by the time we finish him off. So now I'm just going to start, and then we'll go upwards, and you pay a little bit more attention to the upward shear. The first one was just to get mostly all of that long stuff off, and you can see how nice and clean he is. Also, to just make sure that you keep your cutters and your combs, you have a brush handy. Keep your cutters and your combs clear. We just keep brushing them off quite regularly, just to get any bits and pieces of hair and wool out of them. It just frees it all up, and so they don't clog up. So just keep them done, and also you just oil them off every so often to just keep them running smoothly. Make sure that your air filters, just keep your air filters nice and clean, so your machine works well. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can trust him and open this up so I can get under him a little bit more. I'm going to do up. Sometimes you just might have to pull their skin a little bit, just so it's not wrinkling. You can see how it's coming up nice and clean. And you see, by doing this, you're not getting those lines in the animal. I've actually chosen a very good little specimen to start to do this with, because he's standing up nicely. Now in between their neck folds also, you've just got to really get in, stretch out that neck so you can get into all of the little folds. He's got quite a wavy pattern in him. Now these bits here later on, afterwards we trim them up with a fine pair of scissors, like hairdressing scissors, so that we get in and actually trim them up nicely so all the hair is even. Okay, so now we'll do his underbelly. Doing the underbelly, you can actually go sideways, not up and down. It's easier to go sideways, so where it's harder to go up and down. So at least you're not seeing any lines on the underbelly, and it's really hard hard to do both ways. Now, Penny's just going to do under his brisket. So it's easier to lift his leg up and shave right up under to get that nice and clean, because when you're showing them, you need every part of them to stand out. So you see Penny's doing shearing around his elbow on that now, so you've just got to be mindful to pull the skin, or otherwise you end up nicking them. So you just pull the skin in the direction that you want, just so it's tight enough so you can actually use your shears to get in there. Now he's pretty much done. You don't really need to do too much to their legs. Just tidy them up enough that they look even all over. So, yeah. So there's always little bits and pieces that you see. You go back in, you trim them up. Yeah. Alrighty. So now I might just put him down a little bit, and I'll do his head. Okay. So generally, I use an immobiliser. I put them in an immobiliser, and I do their head, trim their head with the immobiliser. But I don't have the immobiliser here at the moment, so I need to take his head collar off. So this way, I'm going to tie him tight, and so I can get at his head. So I'd like you to come in and have a look as I do his head. I just want to explain to you, like, doing their head is really, really important. Because that's one of the first things that a judge looks at, is their head, the head quality. If you're presenting something, you know, if you've got a ram with a good head, and this little ram does have a really, really good head, so it's really important to get their head right. Okay, sure. So I generally start at the back, and I move forward. Now you don't have to go two ways. I only shear one way. So you just got to make sure that you get in behind their ears, up the side of their face. Now he's got little spurs, so it's a little bit difficult to get in. Sometimes you'll have a ram that'll really, really fight you. But if you get into those little spur buds and take as much off as you possibly can. Clean his ears right up, and you can get into those later and trim them with a little pair of scissors, but if he comes up okay, you don't really need to. So their face is really a little bit tricky, mostly, because they don't like their face being touched. But this little man is being exceptionally good. We're blessed with you today, being first in line. I always shear up their face and their neck. This is where you get all the fine hair all through you. Up their neck. Come on, buddy. You're doing good. sometimes with their face, I try not, it depends on the shape of their head. I try not to take their face back really, really smooth. Just, you can actually shape their head really quite nicely. Just taking a little bit off because you still want to see those wrinkles that he's got, because that's a really nice head. So you don't want to take it off too much, but give it enough time that we're shearing him 3 weeks out from the show. It will grow back a little bit. Now, just being mindful not to cut all those wrinkles right out. Oh, mate. You're a good boy. Good boy. Okay, now that we've shorn him right off and we've done his head and his body and everything, so what we do now is we take a small pair of scissors and we just trim around his tail to make his tail region nice and even, so there's no loose hairs there or anything. Just so it's all nicely trimmed, and it's just, I guess it's like going to the barber and they're shaving the back of your neck. You just have it, just so everything's shaped nicely. So you see the difference in now his tail looks a lot better, that he's trimmed up nicely. So then we can go down and then you can trim off any, because we don't shear right down to their feet and what have you. You can just trim off any hair that's hanging around there that okay, we do his front. We actually do look at their feet if they're going into a show. We look at their feet. Now he's just a young ram that you can see his feet don't really need trimming. But I will trim them up just before he goes a little bit, just to make them nice and even, because like anyone's toenails, they grow long and that sometimes, and it depends on the country that you're in as to whether they wear their hooves down or not. This country here, we don't have hard country, so when they walk around, they're not actually, their hooves aren't being trimmed all the time by the earth. So sometimes you will get sheep that their hooves will grow long. It's not as though it's a long toe isn't a bad foot, but it's just a long toe. Like I go and get a pedicure once a month. You shoe your horses all the time. So there's no nothing wrong with trimming a long toe. It's when you've got a sheep that's got a splayed hoof that can't stand up straight, or its hoof it's flattened right out, or one part of its hoof will go out like that. That's a bad foot. You don't need that, and you can't take a sheep like that to the show ring, because as try as you must, you cannot fix it. So you always look for your sheep when you're choosing them. They've got to have good feet. It doesn't matter if their toes are a little long, trim them by all means, because you need them to look dressed and proper. You know, it's like a woman going to a beauty pageant. She goes and gets everything done. It's the same with, you're showing something, you're presenting something, you're actually representing your stud. You want your stud to be showcased. So, and you're showcasing your animals. So the best way that you can prepare them is do it properly. Don't take them into a show ring where they're half done, or they look higgledy-piggledy, or they've got stripes all over them, or they're not fed up properly. With feeding my sheep also, as I said, this little fella's just come out of the paddock, and I'm really proud of him because he's standing up so well. They've just been in grass, and about 2 weeks ago I put them on some favour beans. So he's just had favour beans, grass, and he's had oat and hay, or sometimes there's oat and hay or lucerne hay in the paddock. Now for the next 3 weeks I'll put them on like a show and sale mix, just to give them that little bit extra. I make sure that they have all their vitamins and their minerals. I don't like my sheep to be over fat. I just think that you make them fat, you hide a lot of problems also, or you can create problems with them. So I try and show them in a condition where they're presentable, the judge can see what they are. Even if you take a ewe and lamb into a ring, that if the ewe is down on condition and she's got a big lamb on her, well, any judge can see the conformation of the ewe, and it's not a bad thing. But if you do take a ewe and lamb in, try and feed your ewe up a little bit more so she's not being dragged down by her lamb. I don't like to feed my little showgirls too much. I don't want them to be fat. They can be nice and rounded, but don't make them fat. Well, I'll get him out and I'll put a show halter on him for the first time, and we'll see how we go. Okay, now that he's had his show preparation, I'm just going to teach you or try and show you how I stand them up and what I do. Every animal is totally unpredictable. Every animal is different. They've all got different temperaments. As you can see, he's come through that really quite well, and he's quite placid, although off camera he doesn't like to lead. When I'm leading or trying to get a sheep to come into a show ring, if they're not used to it, by pulling them doesn't really achieve anything. You've actually got to try and hold them tight and get behind them, and let them make it their idea that they're going to go forward. So, and the other thing is that you can do is you just grab them by their tail and you can pull them forward. Now, once you get into the show ring and you find your position where the judge is, the judge will tell you how he wants you to stand, on how he'd like the animals positioned. Now, this now, well, for me, it takes a lot on your knees and you do a lot of pulling. And to pull them, I pull them by the flank, or I push them around with their tail. Now, if he's meant to stand up, like, I always hold their head tight. This is why I have these halters, because they're really good. I can hold them really tight underneath. Hold them tight because you need to show the judge their head. Don't stand in front of them and hold them like this, because a judge cannot see their head. And being a judge myself, I know that doing this to hold a sheep, you're not going to see his head. If you have a look now, you can't see his head. If you stand here and show off his head like that, you can actually see the difference in his head. You can actually see the profile of his head. So that's one very, very important thing. Try and keep his head up a little bit, not pulled right up, but just at a level that you can see the profile. And keep showing the judge his head if you can, if he's going to behave. Now, you look at your animal and you look to see how his legs are positioned. Well, he's looking quite fine at the moment. This leg here could go back a little bit. So if you just either grab them and touch them a little bit, you stand your sheep up as best that you think that they're standing up. He seems to be nice and straight at the moment. And sometimes it's good if you've got a staff member or a friend in the crowd that you can actually watch, and they'll tell you. They'll let you know. If you're concentrating on your animal, they'll let you know, like push that forward back or bring this front foot, you know, forward or what have you. But so to do that, sometimes you just, with your foot, you just touch their foot or you pull it and put it down. But all the time, just trying to keep them really relaxed. Give them a rub, keep them relaxed. Always show the judge their head nice and straight. So some people get down alongside them. I tend to not do that because I've got dodgy knees. So I tend to stand over them because getting up and down, it hurts me. So sometimes the judge will say, okay, turn the other way. So then you actually have to move your animal. Once you've got your animal nice and set and you think that everything's fine, the judge will say, turn the animal around. So then you bring your animal around. I use my knees and the flank. Bring him around, change hands, always keeping control of his head and move him into his position. Move him back to where he's supposed to be. Check his feet. This one needs to come forward. Check the back ones. Standing pretty good, although this, see if you just gently touch their feet, they'll move them. Once again, keep that head looking at the judge. So I get up and down and turn around, and so he's standing there nice and calmly at the moment. So you just wait and you always keep your eye on the judge. You watch the judge, keep eye contact, and make sure that your sheep is in the right position. So there you go. He came out of the paddock yesterday. I think he's come up pretty well. Thank you.